Mr. Match, I got a question for you.
What's that?
Are you feeling witchy today?
I feel like there's a certain magic in the air, yes.
Today's topic is actually something you wanted to do.
Yes, it's something I wanted to do, and you made it into an even earlier thing.
That's how it goes on this show. Before we move on to our topic, I just want to give a brief shout out to Michael on Facebook for liking us. Thanks, Michael. Yes, every time somebody likes a Facebook page, I'm going to thank them on the show. Yeah, today's episode is about witches, specifically witches in pop culture on movies and television. What is a witch?
A witch is an old crone that can hurl lightning bolts and cast spells.
Okay.
That's what the pop culture, but it shifted here in the past couple of years to the young goth girls that place curses on each other, on other people.
The classical witch is green skin, long nose, covered in warts, eats kids, sometimes shooting fires, usually got a bubbling cauldron of some sort of brew going.
It's usually some chant, the double-double, toil and trouble type deal.
The classic horror version of a witch. If you want to get literal, a witch is a woman that practices magic. In a historical sense, back in the days, people would accuse a woman of being a witch, in my opinion, when she wouldn't conform. When she wanted to go off and not marry a man or do her own thing, they would accuse her of being a witch because that would make them uncomfortable.
And the Puritans would also say witches are women who made a pact with the devil.
They were super hardcore Christians, so everything bad had to be satanic as well. And I've always thought this whole stereotype of witches eating children, which is very prevalent. And that goes back to Eastern Europe with Baba Yaga, who's a famous fairy tale witch in Russia and Serbia. A woman doesn't want to conform, which means she doesn't want to have kids, which somehow got twisted into she wants to murder kids. In the last 2 decades, there has been this cultural shift. Wiccans are this new age religion. Changed the perception of the witch. Gone from the Wicked Witch of the West to Willow on Buffy, the common conception of witch, because everything's got to be hotter and sexier now.
Especially there in the 90s. There was a big boom, and that's when that equilibrium started to switch there.
A lot more awareness of neo-paganism. Now, I have a question for you, JD. Why are you obsessed with witches?
It's not really that I'm obsessed.
Why do they give you boners?
The thought that you could influence the environment around you without actually having to touch it, or you could hurl a firebolt from your ass.
It's airing time, come on.
There could be a possibility that one could do something like that. Intrigues me. That's the appeal to me.
If the woman doing that happens to be young and attractive, that's just
that's just a plus, right?
Yeah.
4 girls are about to discover the dark side.
You ever heard of invoking the spirit? Black magic.
This spring, Columbia Pictures welcomes you to the Witching Hour.
Earlier you mentioned, the 90s especially, there was this cultural shift of the witch from ugly old hag to
hot
goth teenager. One of the movies that, if it's not responsible for that, certainly capitalized on it, is 1996's The Craft, the movie we're opening with tonight. This movie came out in 96, and yeah, I think it cashed in on this new age awareness of witchcraft as a thing, and also this was a post-Scream movie.
Yeah.
Suddenly horror movies were hip. So what's The Craft about, JD? Since I understand you're a fan of this film.
Oh, I love this film. These 3 witches are in their own little coven. This new girl, Sarah. God, I'm such a nerd.
They're at a Catholic school, which is ironic.
They happen to see her one day writing something down with her pencil without touching it.
She's making the pencil stand up. She's using her mind to do that.
They find out that she's a 4th sister witch.
She's their 4th, it's what they refer to her.
Yes, in this movie, 4 witches are...
It also has something to do with north, east, west, and south.
Well, in the movie it does.
Sarah joins the group, and that causes a conflict with the other girls, especially Nancy, who is the leader.
Right, who becomes the proverbial witch. And
she's the witch bitch.
She's the one that gets all the power.
Yeah, she takes it too far. Or they start to abuse their power. Something about this movie that I think makes it unique. It's about female characters, led by a female cast, which is not something you see in horror a lot. This is a femme-focused film. It is a little bit about the high school hierarchy. The 4 girls are on the bottom of the popularity at school.
One girl gets dated by the football player.
Skeet Ulrich from Scream plays the guy.
Yes, which is funny because...
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Neve Campbell is also in this movie.
Yeah, that's true. He goes out with Sarah, and then after going on one date, he spreads a lie about her, which is apparently something very similar happened with the Nancy character. So nobody likes this guy. He's a douchebag. When they start to develop this power, they basically use it to become more popular at school, which is what any high school student, they would use it to make their lives better. The film tries to spin a message about power corrupting, how in Wiccan everything comes back to you 3 times.
I understand where they're coming from with that, but one aspect of the film that I really don't care for, they don't really deliver on how much power Nancy invoked from the spirit. When you first see her after they invoke the spirit, she's walking on water, and
all the sharks have washed up
and all these sharks have washed up on the beach. And then what does she do? A couple illusions. She floats one time.
She makes all the red lights turn green.
That's what you're gonna...
The budget was a little low. Yeah, trying to make this message about how power corrupts and all that. The wish fulfillment aspect of the movie is way more entertaining. Part of the problem is the main character, Sarah, played by Robin Tooney, is the least interesting character of the 4 girls.
Right.
They're driving down the street, and Nancy's making the red lights turn green. Sarah's like, you guys, this is not a good thing you're doing. She seems like the one going, stop having fun, guys. The other three girls are way more interesting.
Fight scene at the end is pretty cool, though.
I do like the witches' duel.
Nancy goes all ape shit, hurling shit around the room.
That's well executed. And they're in another gravity. They're on the wall. I do enjoy that.
When she slams the dresser and comes out of the clothes and is like, what the fuck?
Fazura Balk plays Nancy, and she's definitely the best character in the film.
She's the most interesting. She's the one I care about the most.
Balk gives a good performance. And it's notable that this is not her first witch movie. As a child actor, she was in both The Worst Witch and Return to Oz.
Well, hey.
Her performance is very strong. Her character arc is typical teen angst, so she's got a really crappy home life. Her mom is white trash and her stepdad is a douchebag. But she sort of...
She kills him.
Yeah, she kills him, basically. She really does make the part a lot deeper than I think it was written as. The other two, I'm on record as not being the biggest Neve Campbell fan. She's not bad in this.
Yeah, she's pretty good.
Her character has a skin conditioner.
Scars.
Burn scars. When she uses her powers to become beautiful, suddenly she's walking around with a slutty schoolgirl. Neve Campbell looks pretty good as a slutty schoolgirl.
And I like that change of character. She executes that change of character very well.
Rachel True. I like her because she's the first one that thinks maybe they've gone too far. The queen bitch in the school teases her because she's black. They use their powers to make the bully's hair fall out.
All they do is they cast that 3x3 spell.
And there's a pretty interesting scene. They're in the shower room and the girl is sitting on the floor and all her hair is falling. Makes you feel bad even though the character's total biatch. This movie is really 90s.
Yes.
The film reeks of 1996.
Especially when it has the charm music playing there.
Yeah, the cover of How Soon Is Now is played in the film and would later be used as the theme song on Charmed, which I don't think is a coincidence. The soundtrack in general feels very, very 90s, and the direction, Andrew Fleming directed this. There are a couple of scenes, there's a sequence where Nancy just used her powers to basically seduce the one dude. She's freaking out at him and ends up pushing him out the window with her abilities. That scene's a little overheated. The flying nightmare, where Sarah's in bed and the windows open up and the girls come in for the windows, that's kind of cheesy. And I remember the special effects in this movie getting a lot of press at the time, where Fazura Balk's fingers turning into snakes. It's dated now.
Yeah, it hasn't aged well.
No, it hasn't. The last half of the movie looks pretty well. It's pretty well directed overall. A surprise hit back in the day. My sister was gothy, so this was a film that was watched a lot in our household in the 90s.
I also like there at the end when all the girls have lost their power.
Yeah.
They make a little stab at Tara. She cuts him a look and lightning crashes into the tree and then the branch falls.
Nancy's in the crazy house.
And then Nancy's in the crazy house. I can fly.
What's Fazura Balk up to these days? I haven't seen her in anything.
Well, she's the only one besides Neve Campbell.
Rachel True and Robin Tooney, I have no idea what they've done. Fazura Balk's been in a couple of things. She was in American History X. She was in a pretty good episode of Masters of Horror.
She was in Waterboy.
She was in Waterboy, yeah.
Roses are red, violets are blue, but the iris is the flower that will mean the end of it.
You've been saying that you've been wanting to do a witch episode for a while now. My initial reaction was, oh, are there really that many witch movies? Then I had the thought, oh, wait, witch movies. I can use this as an excuse to talk about Suspiria and actually get you to watch an Italian horror movie. And I did indeed make you watch Dario Argento's Suspiria. Now, I just want to clarify. This is certainly Argento's most well-known film, most critically beloved film. But I'm honestly not that big of a fan of this movie. I enjoyed the film, but I honestly prefer some of Argento's other stuff more. As a first-time viewer of Suspiria, JD, what did you think of this movie?
Don't watch it for the first time unless you're on drugs.
I don't really think it's that psychedelic.
It's okay. The death scenes are cool.
And that's Argento's speciality. That opening death scene. The Thing comes through the window and stabs the girl repeatedly. And then she falls through the stained glass window and on a wire and gets strangulated and the glass falls through and kills the other person in the room. And that opening kill is certainly one of the most well-regarded in horror history. And yeah, it's great.
I feel like the rest of the movie, until it gets to a point where someone's going to die, drags on.
You found it to be slow.
Very, very slow. People getting killed come out of nowhere. The gargoyle coming to life and killing the guy.
Well, the gargoyle doesn't come to life. The attack on the blind man is another notable sequence. I really love how that scene builds, plays on the silence in the area and how eerie that is. Personally, when I first saw it, I didn't expect the dog to jump up and attack him.
And it does. It does come up and catch you.
One of the girls is sleuthing and gets chased by something, a person with a razor blade. And if you've seen any of Argento's earlier films, that very much plays like a giallo. Killer with the straight razor, that's very much a recurring image. She locks off in a room, the killer is trying to jiggle the lock, and she sees a window, and she climbs up in through this window. She thinks she's going to be able to escape. She falls into a room full of razor wire instead. Doesn't work out too well for her. Argento's speciality is his death scenes, and yeah, this movie certainly delivers in that regard. But you mentioned how this film is trippy.
It's very trippy.
The use of color in this film is highly noted. Blues and purples and greens and golds. I think it's a little overdone. There's a scene where a girl is being chased and she stumbles backwards into a glass cabinet, and when she falls through the glass, there's this blast of gold light on her. A little overdone. Also, its set design is notable. You commented on the red walls. We haven't even talked about what this movie's about. a girl who goes to study at a ballet school in Germany, and the school is run by witches. Anytime somebody finds out about their secret, they usually end up dying in a violent, mysterious way. That's pretty much the plot. Architecture and set design is a very important thing in Argento's work, and in this film, blinding red walls. The teacher's room is these white walls with flowers drawn on them, and that becomes a plot point at the end. And a great use of scenery in this film is the girls are forced out of their dormitories because there's maggots in the attic. Maggots are falling on them in their brushes and in their mouths and stuff, which is a great gross out. Spend the night in the atrium, and they set up white curtains around them. The room is cool red, and there's silhouettes behind them, which I think that's a wonderful looking sequence. This movie stars Jessica Harper, whom I'm a fan of. If you go back and listen to our horror musical episode, you hear me talking about Phantom of the Paradise. I really like her in this. Your all-time favorite actors in the movie, JD, Udo Kier.
Everybody loves Udo.
Everybody wants to have sex with Udo. He shows up and drops a bucket load of exposition about the witch. Argento's not really interested in story. He really is more preoccupied with the visuals. What do you think of the music in this film, JD?
Very ominous.
Well, the score is by Goblin, and they did music for most of Argento's early films. It's real creepy.
And then the chanting.
Yelling of witch.
Yeah.
I get the impression that you didn't really like the movie, but you appreciated it. You got what they were going for at the very least, I think.
That's not something I'm going to run right out and buy after seeing it.
I don't know if I turned you into an Argento fan with this one. I don't know if this is his most accessible film. Tenebrae is maybe easier to follow.
When it's doing the cool horror stuff, it is creepy.
Quite successful internationally, and prompted Argento to make a sequel, because something we didn't talk about. Suspiria introduced this mythology of the three mothers, three witches that control all the evil magic in the world. And Suspiria is about Mater Suspiriorum, the mother of sighs, and she's in Germany. Second film in the trilogy, 1980s Inferno, is set in New York, and is about Mater Tenebratum, the mother of shadows.
Tell me who you are!
The three mothers. Haven't you understood? Mater Tenebrarum, Mater Lacrimarum, Mater Suspiriorum. But men call us by a single name, a name which strikes fear into everyone's heart. They call us Death! Death!
I made you watch Inferno. I get the impression that you didn't like this one as much as Suspiria. Couldn't get into it in the same way.
I think I liked it a little more.
Really? I got the impression that you hated this movie.
I still wouldn't go right out and buy it.
The biggest problem with Inferno is that the script is really all over the place. Because it opens with this young girl investigating the mother who's finding out she's living in the apartment building where the mother is said to live. There's a long sequence about her investigating. And then suddenly we cut to Rome, where her brother is living. We're following the friend of the brother, and there's a long sequence with her in a library. We get back to the girl in New York after she's been killed. Her brother goes to New York to investigate her death. There really isn't a consistent story. It plays like a series of vignettes.
I like the mother sequence in this film a lot more.
There are some great sequences in Inferno. The sister is investigating this, and she drops her keys into a flooded ballroom underneath of the apartment. She goes in after it. And does that make any sense? Not really, but you gotta go with it. That's Italian horror. The sequence where she's swimming through this underwater ballroom, that is a great sequence.
It does.
It builds up great and then ends with this great jump scare of a corpse floating into view.
You can't tell if that corpse is going after her or
Yeah.
if it's just floating there.
Yeah, is it being motivated? When Mark Friend is in the library, she finds this weird, ominous room underneath the library where some guy is oiling things. And this man has hairy hands and clawed fingernails. He finds out that she has a book about the three mothers. She's being chased by this man, and her shirt gets caught on the door, and that's a wonderful sequence of suspense. Then the film's another problem where she goes back to her apartment and meets this dude in an elevator and brings him back to her room for following this guy. When she gets killed, though, that's a great moment where the body has a knife stab through it, and she falls back and falls through this blue curtain. That's a really fantastic scene. And there are some great deaths. The sister gets her neck sliced open on a pane of glass. When I was showing you this film, making you watch it, and you were protesting much, I was saying, in an American horror film, the glass would go down on that girl's neck once, and her head would pop off, and that would be the end. But in an Italian horror film, the glass comes down 3 times. And then you mentioned the end, the confrontation with Mater Tenebratum. I really like the sequence where the brother climbing through the basement into the witch's lair. Something I've forgotten about, there's a scene where a cat is eating a mouse, and I think that was a real mouse.
Yeah, you felt like the gut come out of it.
Yeah, it was pretty gross. The confrontation with the mother in this one, where she turns into a giant green Grim Reaper.
That's really cool.
I prefer that over the confrontation with Mater Suspiriorum in Suspiria.
Because she just gets stabbed through the throat or whatever.
And that's a problem that all of these movies have. None of the witches are very good.
Yeah.
For being the most powerful witches in the world, they all go down pretty easy.
Especially Mater Tenebratum. She's supposedly the youngest and most vicious of the three sisters. She chases the guy around the room 3 times and then vanishes.
Witches covering her doing shit. And one of them sets the building on fire. Visually, I feel like this film looks fantastic. This movie was shot mostly on sets, but has this intentionally artificial look to it. The bright colors of Suspiria are traded out for more cool blues and purples.
Yes.
And when the fire breaks out in the last act of the movie, it really adds a strong contrast.
Those bright oranges and yellows and reds of the fire pop against the cool blues.
Italian horror films are beautiful. But there are some sequences in this film that doesn't work. A scene where Daria Nicolodi is the actress, that's Aja's mom. She's being attacked by cats. Italian horror filmmakers are terrified of cats. Sorry, I don't get it. And then there's a scene involving rats in this movie that really does not work. Where the old man is trying to drown a bag full of cats. The rats come out of the sewer and attack him. And at the end of the sequence, there's lunar eclipse. The hot dog stand guy runs over and stabs him to death. What the fuck just happened?
More importantly, why would the rat go and save their enemies?
I think the implication is that they're all being controlled by the witches. That scene really does not work. I feel like Suspiria is a better balanced film than Inferno. Individually, the sequences in Inferno are stronger.
I agree.
Would be my opinion.
When I was a little girl, my mother told me that one day a witch would find me. I never believed her. I do now.
You didn't watch it, and I didn't rewatch it. The belated third half of the trilogy, The Mother of Tears from 2007, in the 70s, from about 74 to the mid-80s, Dario Argento was one of the best horror filmmakers around. And in the 90s, something happened. He lost his mind. He went completely insane. Most of the movies he's made since about 1996. I say 96. Some people make the cutoff point even earlier. A lot of the films he's made in the last decade have been terrible. And out of that period emerged Mother of Tears. And there's very little of Argento's style. There's none of the color he's known for. There's none of the camera movement. This movie is full of goofy shit. Some excavation team opens up a tomb that unleashes the third mother, and she starts making shit go crazy in Rome. And all these witches convey in Rome, and they're dressed like extras in a Paul Abdul music video. Aja plays the main character. Her mother was a witch, and Daria Nicolodi appears as a witch. She's like a force ghost, and then Aja's yelling, "Mommy!" The naked Mother of Tears wears a magical t-shirt. There's a monkey. Plot is all over the place. All this terrible shit is happening in Rome. People are being raped. Babies are being thrown into the canals. Police are still investigating Aja for reasons that I can't remember right now. We've mentioned this on our Scream Queen episode. Aja's a good actress, but she's always terrible in her father's films. I think her dad makes her uncomfortable. There is a gratuitous nude scene. There's a scene of her in the shower in this.
Because Italians.
Yeah. The titular character in this, the Mother of Tears, is played by an actress, well, a model named Moran Tejas. I think she's Israeli. Spends the entire film in the nude.
Wrap my head around that.
She's a 100-year-old witch, but she clearly has breast implants. You can see the scars. Udo appears in this one, too, and we needed more of him.
Everybody loves Udo.
Argento really relies a lot on shock value in this film. There are like 3 or 4 dead kids in this, and that's 3 or 4 more than you need. There's a scene where a woman has a spear shoved through her genitals, out through her mouth. Witch orgy at the end where witches are pulling rope out of their asses and flowers out of their backs. There is some decent gore. A witch gets her head crushed in a subway door and an eyeball pops out. That's kind of cool. There's a lot of bad CGI. His movie gave me a hangover.
Lock them out and bar the door. Lock them out forevermore. Nook and cranny, window, door, seal them out forevermore.
Going all the way back to 1922, this is maybe the earliest film about witches. It's called Häxan, Witchcraft through the Ages. First off, it's a silent film, and originally it was a German film. I knew there was no chance of me getting you to watch this. This movie's really interesting. It's ostensibly a documentary about witchcraft. It goes on these real flights of fancy, things that were said to happen during a Black Sabbath.
Does it talk about war pigs?
War pigs? No, there are no war pigs.
I'm sorry, you said Black Sabbath.
It talks about how innocent women would be accused of being witches and tortured because they did something to piss off somebody. Like a young girl made a monk horny, basically. A monk looked at her, he got aroused, and decided she must be a witch. Goes into the modern age. The things that make somebody be accused of being a witch back then, today we would explain as mental diseases. That stuff is in the film and is certainly very interesting, but the things people remember about this movie is the weird shit that happens. A priest at prayer, and then a devil jumps out from behind the pulpit. An old woman is forced to confess some of the things that supposedly happen at a witch's Sabbath. She gives birth to 20 demons, which are actors in really weird-looking masks. A bunch of women line up to kiss a devil's ass. There's a skeleton horse running around. Demons float through the air, and the demons are pumping on butter churns, which is a pretty blatant visual metaphor for something. So that's the stuff that is really memorable at Haxan. In the 60s, this movie was re-released with an experimental jazz score and famous beat author William S. Burroughs narrating it. The movie became a midnight movie for hippies to smoke pot and watch and go whoa to. You don't really need drugs to go whoa to this movie. The stuff that happens on screen is so bizarre.
Ко мне, упыри! Ко мне, вурдалаки! Ко мне, упыри! Ко мне, вурдалаки!
Speaking of weird things happening on screen, from 1967 is a movie called V.I.Y., and this is the first horror film made in the Soviet Union. And the only reason they got away with that is because it was based off a story by Gogol, a very famous author. No surprise then to find out that this movie is more influenced by European art cinema than whatever the American horror filmmakers were doing at the time. V is about a young priest who's going to seminary school, goes out for a night of drunken partying, and after partying all night, he crashes in an old woman's barn, and this old woman comes on to him, and when he rejects her, the old woman jumps on his back and rides him through the sky like a broom, and after this, he thrashes the woman to death, and upon death, the old woman turns into a beautiful young girl. The next day, somebody comes and invites him to this town where he is to watch over the dead body of the mayor's daughter for 3 nights, and naturally, the daughter is the beautiful young woman that he had murdered the previous night. The main plot of the film is weird things happen every night. The first night, the body gets up out of the coffin, beckons to him, and the first thing the priest does is draw a circle of protection around himself. The second night, the coffin rises through the air and flies, and then the third night, the witch stops fucking around, gets up, and summons demons. That's really the best part of V. Midgets in green face paint and masks crawling down the walls, a giant skeleton dragon, and a skeleton is dancing. This weird stuff is happening around the priest. The demons are trying to scare him out of the circle so they can get him. If you're in the mood for something a little different, want to see some weird do-it-yourself special effects about weird, obscure Eastern European mythology, which is all things I enjoy, V is definitely worth checking out.
Hi, I'm Nicolas Cage, and this is a song for you. My favorite things, blue jeans, see a red-haired girl, sweet peanut butter, slow burning candle, cup of tea and a good book, and dance of the reindeer, and also pachinko. Yeah, pachinko was so cute.
There are 2 movies about witches, both titled Season of the Witch. And I've seen the one from 1972 directed by George A. Romero, and you've seen the one from 2011 starring Nicolas Cage. And from my understanding, these are 2 very different films. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that.
Yes, they are very different.
The George Romero film is not really a horror film. It's actually a slow-paced character study about a middle-aged woman whose husband is a jerk and her daughter's growing up and doesn't need her anymore, so she gets into witchcraft to give her a meaning in her life. Aside from a recurring nightmare she has about it, a person in a mask trying to break into the house, this movie is not heavy on horror. Jan White, the main actress, does a very good performance. There's some interesting sequences where she's trying to summon the devil, and meanwhile you see a cat getting in the house. Probably too slow-paced for horror fans, and probably too much horror for drama fans. How does that compare to 2011 Season of the Witch?
Well... In Season of the Witch, Nicolas Cage is this witch hunter / demon hunter / monster hunter.
He's a knight, right?
Or something like that. I don't know. The girl in the cage is a witch.
And they're escorting her to some place.
They're escorting her somewhere. She's your typical controls the elements, can turn into demons and summon monsters type witch.
Okay. Is the movie any good?
That's really hard to say.
It's an action movie starring Nicolas Cage, so already I'm skeptical.
The Nicolas Cage parts are the parts that don't work. But I feel like if they would have cast someone different...
Ron Perlman's in it, though, right?
Yeah.
Does he do anything of note?
He's the witty sidekick. I would recommend it if it comes up on Netflix instant, you're bored and there's nothing else on, by all means, turn it on.
There was a warning.
There are many houses on this foundation. All of them and their tenants come to bad ends.
And only one man listened.
Well, when did this violence begin?
There was a legend.
I will not die!
And only one man believed. There is a superstition, and will anyone survive?
A movie I was trying to get you to watch for this episode.
I watched half of it.
Yeah, 1982, Superstition. And I thought you would like this movie. What is Superstition? It's a slasher film, but the killer is a witch.
Yeah, but barely.
What? She's a witch. She is executed for witchcraft, and she puts a curse on the building. 100 years ago, evil witch was executed in the lake. She was drowned, and now her spirit haunts the house. A silver cross, which was holding her back, was removed from the lake, and now the spirit of the witch is free to roam the house and wreak chaos. The violence in this movie is brutal. A head is exploded in a microwave, and a person is crawling through a window, and the window is closed, and then that person is sawed in half at the waist. And the guy's dragging his guts behind him, and he's in agony before he finally dies. A saw blade pops off a saw, bounces across the room, hits a priest in the chest, and it spins.
So that's where the movie jumped the shark for me.
Really? You did?
That's where I laughed so hard.
Yeah, it's corny, but it's cool, because there's blood spraying all over the place.
It makes no sense. Physics do not work that way.
Physics in an 80s horror movie, you're asking the wrong questions.
No, physics are always relevant in 80s horror movies. It explains why Jason can teleport.
But I think if you had stuck around to the second half of this movie where shit really goes crazy, and the witch stops fucking around and starts killing the family, the kill in this movie that's great. The obnoxious teenage daughter is held down and has a railroad spike hammered into her face. And that is one of the nastiest kills in any 80s horror movie, for me. A body is crushed in a wine press and you see the blood running out of the bottom. Yeah, the family's annoying, the daughter's annoying, the father's an alcoholic, the mother has no development at all. There's a red herring subplot about the creepy old woman who lives next door and her son who has some sort of mental disability. They try to pin the murders on him. I mean, who gives a shit about that? The kills in this movie, man. Come on.
I laughed at him.
I really thought you would enjoy this film. I was surprised when you said you thought it was terrible.
It's not terrible.
But I even think there's some decent atmosphere. There's a great scene where the witch is at the top of the steps, wind blowing in a robe, and she's silhouetted against the window. That's a really cool scene to the point where they put it on the poster. This is one of the few 80s slasher films I can think of where evil triumphs at the end. Nobody makes it out of this one alive. Everybody dies.
Well,
killing.
now you ruined it for me.
Sorry, you should have watched the damn thing. I guess Superstition isn't for everyone.
But Superstition ain't the way.
In the quiet town of Eastwick, where nothing ever changes, 3 beautiful women are about to discover powers they never dreamed they had. Now, the man of their dreams is here to stay for a spell.
Who are you? Just your average, horny little devil.
Jumping ahead to a far more mainstream film from 1987, Witches of Eastwick.
I like this movie.
Is it a horror movie?
It's a horror comedy.
Itty bitty little bits of it are horror. There's like one sequence that's really horror and the rest of it is more comedy.
I would say it's a horror comedy.
Weirdly, I saw this movie a lot as a kid. I don't know why my parents would let me watch this movie as a young kid because it's really not appropriate. But I hadn't seen it in years, so rewatching it just last night. There are these 3 women who are living there and they're not really happy. Cher plays new agey type. She's kind of an artist. She makes these little fertility goddess dolls and sells them.
And she's a single mom.
She's a single mom, yeah. Michelle Pfeiffer's character is also a single mom. In fact, she has a lot of kids. She has like 7 kids.
Yeah, she's not single. She lives with her abusive husband or something.
Oh, I don't remember that. If her husband's abusive, it's not an important plot point.
She answers the door one time, their eye black and blue.
Susan Sarandon's character is a music teacher at an elementary school, and the principal is Sleaze, who's hitting on her all the time, smacking her ass and stuff. And over the course of the film, she gets more in touch with her sexuality. These 3 women are unaware of the fact they have power, especially when they're together. Early in the film, they make it rain. But they're not aware of the fact that they have this power, but they discover it over the course of the film. These 3 women are so powerful that the devil wants to have sex with them. Is he the devil?
No, he's the son of the devil. Label him the Dark Prince.
I don't know if he's literally the devil or if he's just a really powerful warlock. Jack shows up and he proceeds to seduce them all one by one. This is Maximum Jack. This is Jack Nicholson at his most Jack Nicholson-ly. He tells each of the women what they want to hear to get in their pants. Mm-hmm. He's like the college guy who pretends to be into feminism because he thinks it'll get him laid. And in this movie, anyway, it worked.
Yes, in this movie, it worked.
Because he's Jack Nicholson. Basically tells Cher that your life's pathetic, so you have no reason not to sleep with me. He teaches Susan Sarandon to play the cello. The scene that's kind of camp. She plays the cello string so hard that they start to burn. She grabs him and kisses him and they fuck. I don't even remember how he gets into Michelle Pfeiffer's pants. She's like the least important of the 3 characters.
Anyhow, it has some cool...
Yeah, some powers. What do you think of that tennis scene where they're playing tennis and they make the ball float in the air?
That was pretty cool.
I guess.
I like the cherry pit thing, though.
Yeah, that's the one moment of hard. The subplot is extraneous. Michelle Pfeiffer works at a newspaper. She's a writer for the newspaper. Her editor is Richard Jenkins, who's married to a character played by Veronica Cartwright. Her character falls down the stairs, breaks her leg, and then she goes crazy. And she seems aware of the bad mojo that's in the air.
Because she's so Christian. She's the soothsayer.
He uses her power to make her vomit up cherry pits, which is gross.
Yeah, but it's so well executed.
He gets all 3 of the women pregnant. They decide that, wow, this guy's passive-aggressive, manipulative douchebag. Let's dump him. When that happens, he gets pissed, uses powers to torture them, essentially.
There's this one fruit that he cuts into, and it hurts Michelle.
When I first saw the movie, I thought she was having a miscarriage. Blood splatters on this creepy clown doll in the kid's bedroom.
Yeah, I thought that was the implication.
She has a kid later in the film, so I guess she didn't have a miscarriage. They decide to get back at him, make a little wax facsimile of him. And that's the big comedic scene at the end of the movie where Jack is going insane. He's in an ice cream shop. There's a pain in his leg, and he starts smashing the glass and digs his hand in the ice cream and goes nuts.
The women's speech at the church. Am I right, fellas?
He stumbles into a church and he starts ranting about...
He doesn't stumble into the church. Wind blows him
into
the...
growling like an animal. And he gives the speech about, did God make a mistake when he invented the woman? And I actually had forgotten about how that sequence ends with him going back to the house and they set the doll on fire and he turns into a giant grotesque monster. The special effects in that scene don't hold up all that well.
But the rest of the film does. The scene where they're arguing and then the ground splits.
Yeah, that's a good moment. All that stuff is fun, and obviously the performances are very good. Susan Sarandon's very good. Cher is very good. Jack is doing his thing. It's pretty fun. I didn't realize until I rewatched this film this was directed by George Miller, who did all the Mad Max movies. And Babe. And Happy Feet.
Okay, now those last 2?
Yeah.
That's weird.
I gotta agree.
Especially when Mad Max would eat Babe.
Yeah, he would. Because there's no food in the wasteland, son.
In a time of fear and suspicion, his coming was foretold. He has the face of an angel.
Channel me a spirit.
The charm of the devil.
Hear me when I say he's evil. Evil absolute.
And the powers of a god. Satan also has one son.
And the witch is not a real common thing you see in horror movies because nobody really agrees on what a witch is and what they can do.
Yeah.
And sometimes you even get a movie like 1989's Warlock, which is about a male witch. You like Warlock from 89. You're a fan of this one.
Right. It's Terminator, but with magic.
Basically, in 1700s Boston, really, really evil Warlock is about to be executed. Before he's executed, he spends some mojo that sends him into the future. A witch hunter goes after him. In the future, they meet up with this girl, Cassandra with a K.
Doesn't the witch hunter refer to her as Cassandra with a K?
Yes, because that's how she introduced.
Follow me, Cassandra with a K. Come with me if you want to live.
Yeah, the MacGuffin in this movie is that the Warlock is after the pages of this magical book, this Grimorum, that has God's true name written in it, and he's going to speak God's true name backwards and undo the universe. Why does the Warlock want to do this? It's not really important.
He's evil, guys.
Because he's an evil guy. He's a real evil dude. You don't want to fuck with this man.
He can make you age rapidly.
Yeah, that's something that does happen. He makes Laurie Singer age 20 years in a day. It sort of surprised me at how funny it is rewatching it. There is a lot of fish out of water humor. People from the 1700s in modern Los Angeles, look at how stupid they are. Redfern is the name of the witch hunter, and he's scared of cars and planes. Part of the joke is that evil Warlock adapts to modern life a lot more easily.
And apparently Amish know the signs of witchcraft.
A scene that's both funny and also really stupid. The Warlock has made flying spells. A cop is sitting on the road late at night with his radar. Suddenly something zooms past the car going 100 miles per hour. And it's silly, but it's fun, and that's what this movie is. It's a silly 80s horror film. But there is some pretty effective horror elements in this movie. Upon meeting Cassandra Fakay's gay roommate, the Warlock bites his tongue off. He tears Mary Warnoff's eyeballs out. Surprisingly, he kills a kid. He murders a little boy, and happens all off screen. I'm surprised it went to that place. He has the eyeballs floating in his hands. There's some clever screenwriting. This film was written by David Twohy, who would later go on to write the Riddick series and Waterworld. You know a witch is in your house because milk goes sour and bread won't rise. And one of the ways to impede the Warlock is to hammer nails into his footprint. This causes him immense pain, and the witch hunter throws a weather vane at the Warlock and pins him. Witches obviously can't step on hallowed ground. And they figure out what side of the cemetery is holy by stabbing the bloodstained weather vane at the ground, and if it sizzles, they know, okay, well, this is holy ground and he can't step on it.
Kind of like the old-time vampire or werewolf movies where it describes the quote-unquote monster's strengths and his weaknesses.
Exactly, and I really, really like that. Warlock has a pretty good cast, truthfully. Made Julian Sands something of a cult figure. If he's known for anything, it's for the series. Really,
he was in other stuff.
Yeah, he's been in other things. Naked Lunch and The Medallion. He shows up in stuff from time to time. It is not surprising to read that a small portion of the female population find him incredibly sexy to him, and he's good.
British accent.
Yeah, the accent. Yeah, and he's good in this. Richard E. Grant plays Redfern. He's primarily a comedic actor. He actually is convincing in this part. I like him. Laurie Singer, otherwise known as the girl from Footloose.
Everybody could.
She's actually very charming. I like her character in this. The score is very well done. It has an awesome poster art. This movie got rented a lot as a VHS tape, and it's because that poster art is so cool.
Oh, is that the one where it's the shadow that comes up into the
Yes,
demons?
yeah, he's standing there and his shadow is a monster. I remember my local video store, Top 20 Video, since closed down years ago, but in their horror section they had that poster on the wall. That's why I remember it so strongly.
The heavens shall turn black as death. The birds shall be severed from the sky. And within the heart of each lie the icons of our destruction. His coming was foretold.
The Warlock is here.
The son of Satan has returned to fulfill his destiny.
What dost thou command?
This film was successful enough to spawn a sequel. In 1993, we got Warlock, The Armageddon. The Armageddon? I didn't think there was more than one. When I said I'm watching Warlock for the show, you said, well, you gotta watch Warlock 2. It's so much better than the first one. I'll be the judge of that. The thing with Warlock 2 is the story is much more ambitious than the first one, and the tone is different. The film is simultaneously more fun than part 1, but not as satisfying.
Well, that's a matter of opinion. They take him from level badass Warlock up to level Chuck Norris Warlock in this movie.
Wikipedia describes this as an in-name only sequel. Now, I would agree with that. There's really nothing connecting this to the first film besides Julian Sands as the Warlock. The Warlock is upgraded from merely a really powerful witch to the literal son of Satan. His dad is the devil, and he is here to bring about the end of the world. The problem with this movie is the main plot is total nonsense. The society of druids. There's going to be a lunar eclipse, and then a couple days later there's going to be a solar eclipse, and during this time the wall between hell and earth is thin, and he has to collect these rune stones, and when he brings the rune stones together, it'll open the portal to hell and bring the devil into this earth, and the druids have to kill their children and then bring them back to life. The prophecy says they're going to be powerful druid warriors who will save the world. Who gives a shit? None of that stuff is interesting at all. The stuff about this movie that is interesting is the Warlock comes back to life in Boston.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, a woman gives birth to him.
Out of nowhere. She's not pregnant. She's not.
Her belly swells, and she drops a slimy thing on the ground that grows into a naked Julian Sands, sets her corpse on fire.
I mean, how much more badass can you be?
Her date comes to the door, and he kills her date. You know who that guy is?
Udo Kier?
That is Zach Galligan from Gremlins.
It is, isn't it?
He opens the door, and it's like, holy shit, that's Zach Galligan. The part of this movie that's fun is he goes on a road trip across the country collecting these rune stones, and every time he meets somebody who has one, there's an extended sequence where he fucks with them and then kills them in a very creative way. And that's the part of this movie that's very entertaining. Levitates a woman up into the air, then drops her through the roof of the building, and she's a fashion designer, lands on the runway, and blood splatters over everyone and bites a dude's eye out. The one that's really cheesy but fun goes to this guy who's a modern art collector. He twists the person into a modern art sculpture. The best kill in this, though. It's completely senseless. There's no reason for it to be in the movie other than to get another kill in. The Warlock steals the General Lee. He's driving the General Lee down the street, and he picks up a hooker. And the hooker is talking, and she won't shut up, so he scalps her. He grabs her hair, tears her hair off, and kicks her out of the car. There's no plot reason for that scene to be in the movie, but it's really, really cool.
Told you you'd like it.
Yeah, Julian Sands is hamming it up. He is digging into each cheesy one-liner they give him. He's having a ball.
I like the old-fashioned Wild West showdown between the druids and the Warlock. That was pretty cool.
When he shoots them with his fingers.
Like, that's cool.
Oh yeah, that stuff's a lot of fun. I really like that stuff.
This is the witch movie I've always wanted to write.
When I told you this movie was directed by Anthony Hickox, who also directed Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, you said, well, that explains a lot. And
yes.
The two films are very similar in tone. The difference is that cheesy one-liner throwing villain archetype. In my opinion, it doesn't work for Pinhead, but it really works for the Warlock. Hickox, he also directed the Waxwork movies. He directed Sundown, The Vampires in Retreat. His direction is always very energetic, but I always feel like it's undisciplined too, because none of his movies are really good enough to be good, but they all have fun stuff in them. Did enjoy Warlock the Armageddon. And there's a third film, Warlock 3, The End of the Innocents. I didn't see this one because Julian Sands isn't in it. It's Bruce Kane, who I know as the bad guy from Highlander 4. You have seen...
years ago. It has the cool death scenes that are associated with the series. He just does Warlocky stuff, you know? It's.
Do you remember if the film has any connection to the second one? Is it also an in-name only sequel?
The only connection it has to the second one is that they bring him back somehow.
Okay. I really didn't feel any need to check this one out. I feel like without Julian Sands in the main part, a lot of the entertainment value goes down.
That one also made it to the theaters. They had a very limited release. I remember it being advertised on TV.
Oh, really? The Warlock is certainly not as iconic a horror villain as a Freddy or a Jason. He didn't get an action figure back in the day.
He should have.
He should have, yeah. I would buy an action figure of the Warlock. Did you know there was a video game? There was a Super NES video game for the second film.
Do you get to play as the Warlock?
Of course not.
Then I don't care.
Yeah, anytime they do a horror movie video game, you never get to play as the villain. Like, remember the terrible Super NES Bram Stoker's Dracula game? I rented that as, oh man, I'm going to play as Dracula, and inside you're Keanu Reeves, and I don't want to fucking play as Keanu Reeves. I want to be Dracula. What the hell?
The Witches. For when a little boy accidentally stumbles into their secret world, he finds they've got a lot more power than he ever imagined.
From 1990, The Witches. Now, earlier we were talking about how one of the things we like about Warlock is how it gave the witch a very specific series of traits and weaknesses. This movie does something very, very similar, based off a book by Roald Dahl, who also wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Matilda.
Isn't it Ronald Dahl?
No, it's no N. Primarily known as a children's author. He wrote thrillers, he wrote erotica, but he's primarily known as a children's author. But even as a kid, I always thought his stuff was a little edgier, even though it is a kid's film. You have a kid outsmarting adults, they get turned into cute little mice. This film is pretty dark for a children's film. A grandmother was telling her grandson a fairy tale about witches, and she says witches kill children. The movie doesn't dance around it, it doesn't use any cutesy synonyms, it doesn't talk about witches sending people to another dimension. Witches kill kids. Witches have purple eyes, and they have no toes, and they wear itchy wigs because they have no hair. It does provide provide the series of
tests,
things you can do to figure out if a woman is a witch. Even though this is a kid film, it is amazingly grotesque at times.
Now, is this another one that you've never seen?
I never saw this movie as a kid.
I like this movie.
The big standout sequence that really impressed me, Angelica Houston plays the head witch, the high grand witch. They're having a meeting in this hotel where the family is at. The little boy overhears the witch's evil plot. What happens is Angelica Houston takes off her face, her body contorts, and she becomes this very ugly, grotesque woman. She has the big long nose and the warty skin. Wow, this is like a David Cronenberg movie all of a sudden.
It plays with the concept of the old crone style of witch.
Yeah, it really takes that idea and then extends it to its furthest conception. And I really like that. Jim Henson's Creature Shop did the effects in this film. They work pretty well. When they change the little boy into a mouse, even then that's grotesque. It's surprisingly twisted for a kid's movie. Angelica Houston gives a very good performance. She's really over the top. She has this accent of undetermined European origin. All the stuff with the kid getting turned into a mouse, that's fine. I've got no problems with that. It's cute. The ending totally wimps out. In the book, the little boy stays a mouse, and they basically said he's going to die real soon because mice don't live that long. But in the movie, they have a good witch show up at the last minute and turn him back into a human.
Well, they made it a kid's movie.
This movie bombed back in the day, and that's really no surprise, because I imagine kids left en masse screaming. It'd be a good starter for our movie. God forbid should we ever have children. Though your hypothetical child will probably be watching A Nightmare on Elm Street when she's 2.
Hey, it teaches women empowerment.
Weirdos! Sisters! All Hallows Eve has become a night of frolic, where children wear costumes and run amok.
Let's quit talking about that Hocus Pocus and
move
on to the next film.
Speaking of kids' movies about witches, 1993.
Is this really a kids' movie, though?
Hocus Pocus is a kids' movie, without question. And I watched this movie a lot as a child.
It's definitely kid-friendly, and I'm not saying that it's not, but I don't feel that it's actually a kids' movie.
No, I disagree.
It's a Halloween comedy.
It's a Disney film. And I remember watching this movie in school. I remember watching it every Halloween. Every generation, I think, gets their kid-friendly horror film. In the 80s, it was probably Gremlins, and I hope the modern generation seeks out Coraline. For our generation, this was the Halloween movie. It holds up, actually. Hocus Pocus is not bad. Maybe it's nostalgia speaking, but I feel like this movie is actually good. Tell the people who might not know what Hocus Pocus is about.
Sarah Jessica Parker playing a witch before she looked like one. I mean, seriously, look at her. I'm sorry.
The movie's set in Salem, of course. 100 years ago, 3 sisters, the Sarandon sisters, who are witches, they killed some kids, they were hung. Before they die, should a virgin light the black candle on Halloween night, they will be reborn. Oh, and then they turn a dude into a cat. That's important. Who stars in this film?
Bette Midler,
Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy.
Thank you.
Play the witches. My mom was a big fan of her, so I watched a lot of Bette Midler movies growing up. She's certainly very entertaining.
Are you the wind beneath her wings?
I wouldn't go that far. First off, she looks ridiculous. She has this ridiculous makeup on with these perpetually pursed lips and this frizzy hair. She has this very exaggerated way of speaking.
I like how the lip makes a heart.
Yeah, that happens. You mentioned Sarah Jessica Parker. This is in that weird period where she was still attractive.
She's supposed to be this slutty sister.
The one of looser morals. Kathy Najimy is the dumb one.
Their powers reflect these. Sarah Jessica Parker is supposed to be the sexy, sultry sister, and she can sing and lure Kathy Najimy, who's the clearly overweight sister. She can smell out children. The oldest sister would, of course, be the most powerful because she's the oldest, and she can hurl lightning.
You like it when your witches can do that kind of shit. But this is a comedy. This is not really a horror film, even remotely. There is a lot of fish out of water shenanigans. The witches are baffled by asphalt, buses, and television. There's a scene where they're on the bus driver who's clearly trying to sleep with
every single one of them, actually.
Yeah, really. They wander into Gary Marshall, he's dressed up as the devil, and that scene is ridiculous. But the best joke in this movie, it's a very small moment. The witches are in the house with Gary Marshall, who's pretending to be the devil. These 3 little trick-or-treaters dressed as the Sanderson sisters walk up and steal their brooms, and then off-screen you hear the whoosh sound effect. It's a very small joke, but it's my favorite joke in the movie.
Well, I like all the zombie stuff.
Billy Bones, Winnie's ex-lover.
Some of the best jokes in the movie are the slapstick that happens with him. Running through the graveyard, and they pull the tree limb back, and then it smacks him in the head, and his head
comes off. Don't lose your head, Billy. And he looks like Johnny Depp.
That's threads.
Finally cuts his threads on his mouth and spits out some leaves. He doesn't call her a bitch.
Hag. He calls her an old hag.
An old hag.
I waited 200 years to say that to her.
All the 90s kids movies always had some sort of moral. And the moral of this film is appreciate your sibling. The main character, Max, has a little sister is bratty, he doesn't like. The guy that turns into a cat, his sister was killed and his spirit can't rest. The movie doesn't push that too hard. Integrated into the story fairly organically. The scene in this movie that everybody really remembers is when the witches wander into a nightclub where they're having a Halloween party. Bette Midler gets up on stage
and starts singing, I'll put a spell
on you. Because you don't cast Bette Midler in your movie and not have her sing. Why would a witch know how to sing a song and not going to do a microphone? But as a kid, you clearly don't think of that. And then you mentioned the scene where Sarah Jessica Parker's character sings her siren song and lures all the children out of their beds, and that moment is genuinely eerie. Hocus Pocus, I don't know how good it really is. It's still funny.
It weaves its spell.
I just want to apologize to Mike's mom and Josh's mom and my mom. I am so sorry. Because it is my fault. Because it was my project. I am so scared.
When it comes to witch movies, there's a pretty big elephant in the room we haven't addressed as of yet.
Yeah, but do we have to? Because they're both pretty mediocre films.
We're going to talk about this, man. When it comes to horror films that influence the direction of the genre, there are very few recent examples more influential than the Blair Witch Project from 1999. This movie popularized the concept of found footage, and now that's a very dominant movement in the genre.
I really hate this movie.
This movie was obviously a huge pop culture phenomenon. This movie was insanely successful.
Because they marketed it as a true story.
It tricked a lot of people into thinking it was real. Did you ever think it was real?
When I first watched it.
Really?
I did, yeah.
No, not me. Sorry. I don't want to be the hipster here and say I was sophisticated as an 11-year-old.
Up until...
the end credits?
Pretty much. Up until the part where the guy is standing in the corner and he turns around looking like a monster and smacks her upside the head or whatever.
That doesn't happen. The guy's in the corner and she just drops. She doesn't turn into a monster.
I thought he turned around and looked at her and...
Nope, that doesn't happen.
Okay, well, I remember the movie differently. Up until that point, I thought that there was a possibility that it could be real, but I thought the guys were going to come back at the end and be like, April Fools or whatever, you know?
I did not buy into it as a kid. I recognized it as the clever marketing gimmick that it was. Classmates of mine, I remember in the 6th grade, the guy I sit next to in science class was like, no, man, it's real! After the film was so successful, there was a very immediate backlash, where everybody said, this movie actually sucks, and it's 80 minutes of jerks wandering around the woods. And I used to agree with that. But rewatching it for this episode, I actually have done an about-face about this film. The Blair Witch Project is a pretty good movie. The mythology of the Blair Witch is very believable. They go into the town, they talk to the people in Burkittsville, which is, of course, a real place. I've been there. They build it up so that it seems like a very believable urban legend. No less ridiculous than the Bunny Man or Mothman. Those are some of our local urban legends in this area. The movie starts with a title card that says, these 3 teenagers went into the woods they were never seen again, this is their footage. You know they're not making it out of the woods. This unsettling tone. At the beginning of the movie, they're in the woods, they're laughing, they're joking around, but you know they're not making it out. That setting really goes a long way. There's a scene where they're in their tent, and they hear something strange, and they go running into the forest, they're sitting there and they're listening for weird noises, and it's a subtle moment. I honestly can't believe a movie that this subtle, where everything happens off screen. You don't see anything. I'm surprised this movie became as hugely successful as it was. Little things you do see are weird piles of rocks outside the tent, very famously the stick men. The scene that really works is when Heather discovers a bundle of sticks that have something in them. It's blood. That actress, Heather Donahue, was legitimately freaking out. The directors basically stranded these actors in the woods and said, yeah, some things are going to happen. They didn't tell them what. When she seems panicked, she really is. You mentioned the ending. I feel like that ending is incredibly creepy. Find a house, they wander in, they go down in the basement, the guy's facing the corner, and then she falls over dead. You have no idea what the hell happened. If you pay attention to the film, you realize he's facing the corner. There's a reference earlier about a serial killer who blamed the murders of the children on the witch, and he would make them stand in the corner while he was killing the other kids. Well, you probably wouldn't pick up on that on the first viewing. That's so stark. Cuts to black, there's no music, that's the end of your movie. I have to say, this one affected me. I found it to be very disquieting and creepy.
Well, let's talk about the sequel.
Yeah, the sequel, however, movie this successful, there was no way they weren't doing a sequel. The movie made too much money. I don't know what their thought process was. Like, how do you make a sequel to the Blair Witch Project? Found footage sequels are very common now, but at the time it was still a novelty. The original, it's a closed story. There's nowhere to go from there. Instead, they had an idea that is legitimately kind of interesting. Took it from a meta example. It's set in, quote-unquote, our reality, where the Blair Witch was just a movie, and it's about how people are going to Burkittsville to have Blair Witch tours. There's this guy who's selling stick figures and dirt from Burkittsville to people over the internet, and it completely dismisses the found footage perspective. It's shot as a normal film. There's a goth girl named Kim and a Wiccan named Erica, and then this married couple who are writing a book, Steven and Tristan. Then they go into the woods, and then weird shit starts to happen. I mentioned how The Craft felt so much like a 90s movie. This just stinks of the year 2000. The movie opens with a Marilyn Manson song. It's the most typical, stupid, turn-of-the-century studio horror film you could think of. There are so many cliches in this, I wonder if it was written as a parody.
It would make the movie better.
Pretty laughable, anyway. This film is exceptionally stupid. The movie is told in flashback. The people are at the police station, and all that does is drain it of any drama, because then you know nobody's going to die. First thing the people do when they get into the woods is do a bunch of drugs. That's what you do when you're in the middle of the forest. You smoke pot and drink, and they even have a crack pipe. Most of the movie is devoted to these characters yelling at each other.
This movie is poorly written.
Upon any scrutiny, this film stops making any sense at all. These weird things are happening. There's no explanation for them. Is the Blair Witch responsible? But the Blair Witch is just a movie. Is it real? How does this connect to the first film? The film tries to have this level of ambiguity where it makes you wonder what really happened, but it in no way earns that. There's these ridiculous nightmare sequences where people see things like a guy in an electric chair, a spooky backwards walking ghost girl, or the one that just made me laugh is a guy walks in and the goth girl is standing there eating an owl. That made me laugh and laugh and laugh, sitting there taking big bites out of an owl.
Yeah, this movie.
It's terrible.
Was there like a lot of studio tampering with this film?
They asked the original filmmakers behind Blair Witch to come back and make it, and they wanted more time. Wanted some time to make something decent, and the studio said, no, we gotta strike while the iron is hot. So they cracked this out in a year. Even a public that had Blair Witch fever rejected this film outright. It made its money back. The film was made for nothing. It was successful, but no further sequels were produced. Blair Witch was a true pop culture phenomenon. There were video games.
I don't remember video games.
Yeah, there were 3 computer games. There were 3. And there was a series of young adult books like Goosebumps, which was very popular at the time. Parodies of it were everywhere. Speaking of hot girls in the woods, nice segue, buddy. The next film on our list here is The Woods from 2006. Now, this movie was directed by Lucky McKee, who directed May, which, as I've already talked about in our Scream episode, is a film I'm a huge fan of. It sat on the shelf for years. This movie took like 4 years to come out. When I finally got around to seeing it, it was disappointing. As a follow-up to May, I was disappointed in it. Rewatching it, The Woods, actually, it's not bad. Very similar to Suspiria. Girl goes to a school. School's run by witches. You enjoy this film?
Dude, it's been years since I've seen it.
The sound design, there's these creepy whispering voices, which are provided by Angela Bettis, by the way. Decent music. There's some use of shadow that's pretty interesting. Because it's a Lucky McKee movie, there's some suggestions at a lesbian relationship. Agnes Bruckner is in it, Patricia Clarkson.
Yeah, but
Rachel Nichols.
That CGI tree monster.
The CGI trees that's like the biggest issue. Trees aren't scary. There's nothing you can do to make a tree frightening. It does have Bruce Campbell in it. It's a decent follow-up. There aren't a lot of witch movies out there, but just last year we kind of had two very different films. We already talked a little bit about these, but we can go into a little more detail. In 2013 we had Hansel and Gretel, Witch Hunters. This is part of this current studio trend of taking fairy tales and making dark and gritty versions of them.
But this one kind of worked.
I was expecting it to be terrible. It sat on the shelf for a couple years. It was dumped in February, but it's actually really fun. I mean, it's a very campy action horror movie. Even though it's set in like 1400s Germany, all the characters are in tight leather things, and Hansel, Jeremy Renner, is diabetic. There are some cool creative witch designs in this. There's one that's enjoined.
Yes.
I don't want to oversell it because you have to go in with low expectations. Pretty amusing for what it is. And then Lords of Salem, also from last year we talked. Rob Zombie is such a divisive figure. People hate him. He was trying something different. He was trying to make not a shock gore movie. He was trying to make something more subtle, or more quiet, I guess I should say. Legitimately creepy in spots. Build up a foreboding atmosphere. The last hour of the film, it stops making any sense. It just becomes pure abstraction. And certainly some of the images are quite memorable. Midget baby Satan, Cherry Moon pumping a stuffed goat, mummy Pope masturbating, and there's weird stuff in this movie. It's a strange film. At the very least, it creates some memorably bizarre imagery. witches aren't just in the movies. There have been a number of television series. Here you get to ramble, because I really don't have any experience with any of these. What would you say was the first time you realized you had a boner for witches?
Well, that would have to be Willow and Buffy.
Did Charm help feed that interest?
Well, yeah. The thing with Charm, watched every single episode at least once. I'll admit that.
My God.
Was a little bit maybe on the poorly executed. So, I mean, it was very successful. It ran like 8 or 9 seasons.
It ran for 9 seasons. How many actresses did they go through?
Just 2.
Well, originally it was Shannon Doherty, Rose McGowan, and Alyssa Milano, right?
No.
No? Oh.
It was Holly Marie Combs.
Right.
Shannon Doherty.
Right.
And Alyssa Milano.
Okay,
and then they killed off Shannon Doherty.
Because she's impossible to work with.
And then they brought on Rose McGowan. And then Rose McGowan was the sister from season 4 all the way up until the show ended.
My dad used to watch this show because he thought the girls were hot.
One of the reasons I watched it.
And I just always thought it was so incredibly cheesy. The one boyfriend was like a Cupid or something, right?
It got really convoluted.
And Dr. Doom is on the show.
There are some premises there that are cool. There's 3 very powerful sister witches. They each have a different power. One can stop time, one can move things with her mind, and then one can see the future.
Like Charlie's Angels.
Right, but with witches.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that the series owes a lot to Buffy? It was on the Warner Brothers channel at the same time. I think they were definitely trying to capitalize on the success of one show.
Maybe. Went on for 3 years after Buffy.
Unlike Blair Witch, it actually did have a Book of Shadows on it.
Yes, it did. But it was a good Book of Shadows.
Well, yeah, because the witches were good in this, of course.
I feel like if you're a fan of witches and cinema and stuff like that, you should maybe check it out. Maybe.
And cheesy American television from the late 90s?
Right. American Horror Story.
Yeah.
Season 3 of Oven.
You've been trying to get me to watch this for the last several months. When American Horror Story came, initially it was interesting. Oh, here's a new horror show. But then I started reading about the first season with Rubber Man and the man-ass and ghosts that can have sex with people, and there's an abortionist ghost in the basement. Ow, the edge. It is interesting that each season is different. And I'm going to have to watch next season because it's going to be set on a creepy carnival. At least give it a shot. The previous season was The Coven, and it was about witches in New Orleans.
Right. Really interesting.
Care to expound on that at all?
This is another thing where when a witch is born, they have one specific power.
Okay.
They can develop multiple powers over time. Powers known as the 7 Wonders.
Okay.
And I can't remember what they all are. The witch that can control all 7 wonders is the Supreme.
Like the Supremes?
The Queen of the Witches.
Okay.
But that's a mild subplot. Closer to the end, become more prominent. What is cool is what they were able to accomplish with a TV budget.
The show has a pretty big cast. Jessica Lange and Kathy Bates. I know Stevie Nicks was on an episode as herself.
Kathy Bates is immortal. They can't be killed, even if you cut off her head. You have scenes of Kathy Bates just being a head, being forced to watch Roots because she's racist and stuff like that.
Okay.
She would torture black people and paint their blood on her skin to try.
She was a bad racist.
Right. Like a really bad racist. The Black Witch that's played by the girl who played Precious.
Oh, okay. Gabrielle, whatever.
Yeah, I can't remember her name. She gets a hold of Kathy Bates' head and told to bury her 6 feet under, but she goes, no, I've got a better torture for her, and then she makes her watch Roots.
Cute.
This is the one that really got me hooked on American Horror Story.
Yeah,
I never watched the other 2 seasons.
You since went back and watched the first 2.
Yeah. This is a really strong one. It's got lots of good gore.
I know the show in general pushes the TVMA rating to its limit.
Yeah.
The next
Has a Minotaur.
What the fuck is a Minotaur doing in the show?
You have to watch it. The plot usually explains everything.
Okay. And then another weird basic cable witch. I saw this advertisement and I had no idea what it was, and you said you were watching it. The Witches of East End? Is this of any interest at all? This was on Lifetime, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Television for women?
It's got hot babes that can hurl fireballs in it.
Well, then you're already sold. Would you say this is worth watching in any way?
Probably not. I mean, I'm still going to watch it because I've already watched the first season.
Well, what's it about?
It's basically like Charm for the modern age.
So what, the witches are on Twitter?
The witch family is hailed from Asgard because of a
God.
great battle. So they're actually like these immortals. The one cool aspect this show has is that each witch has their curse for using their powers or whatever. The one, she's cursed to always be a mother. And she has to be a mother like every 30 years or something like that. Whenever she gives birth to 2 girls and when they turn 30, they die. And then she instantly becomes pregnant with the oldest one again. And
this sounds terrible. You're not selling me on this
one.
Yeah.
I'm not really sold on it either. I'm going to see what the second season does.
But you'll watch it because it has hot witch babes throwing fireballs in it.
Pretty much.
This episode could have been longer. There's a film from the 60s with Christopher Lee in it called City of the Dead, which sounded interesting. We didn't talk about practical magic. I haven't seen in years. That sounded like the romantic comedy version of The Witch.
It's never really been explored to the fullest extent that you could possibly do
with
that genre.
You could definitely do more with it, yeah. Well, I guess that about wraps it up, you think? Good episode? Good episode?
Good episode.
Good episode. As always, you can email us at bangersinmash88@yahoo.com. That's the word bangers, the letter N, the word mash, the number 88@yahoo.com.
And don't forget to hit us up on Facebook.
We're actually gaining a little bit of traction on social media, which is nice.
And again, thank you, Michael.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mike, so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks to all our followers and listeners. The summer's going to be busy for us. We got some big things coming.
Should we tell them what we're going to start?
No.
Come on.
Let's
I can't wait.
All right. Drop the nuclear bomb.
Starting with our next episode, we are going to do the Godzilla quadrilogy.
He made me call it that. We're doing a 4-part Godzilla-a-thon.
Godzilla-a-thon.
Obviously in anticipation of the new film, which we're both very excited for. Look forward to that. Catch it. It's a big, giant radioactive dinosaur. It's hard to miss. You know, I got a curse too. I got this thing with my bowels. It's a mess, man.
That just beats the shit out of me.
I'm sorry.
Ding dong, the witch is dead. The wicked witch. Ding dong, the wicked witch is dead. Wake up, you sleepy heads. Rub your eyes, get out of bed. Ding dong, the wicked witch is dead. She's gone.